Hello, I've had a few questions and requests about the different sounds available in DreamKit Zenith. I'm going to go through all 120. Glorious. Down below I'll put little markers so you can skip along for any that you're curious of. So the first one that we come to, if I come up here, is feedback M1. And you'll notice that some of these sounds have different variations, and I'll get a little bit more into that as we sort of keep going. So feedback M1, it's an evolving sound, so it comes into pitch. And so M1 and M2 are different mic groups. M1 is a contact mic, and M2 is a condenser microphone mic'd a little bit further away, so you get that kind of sense of distance. I'm just using the close mics at the minute, but we can obviously bring overhead and room into things. Or mute the close mics altogether. I love how it moves around the room. We'll just stick to the close mics. I might bring stuff in as we're going along. Feedback SSM1. So that is mic group 1, which is the contact mic, but with, as I've called it, a short start. So it's kind of chopped, so it's not natural. This is sort of in reference to my personal obsession with the American band Don Caballero and their track, the Peter Criss Jazz. In that, there's like this kind of Rhodesy sort of guitar texture that I think is guitar harmonics with a noise gate. I think, don't know that, but it's very sort of sine tone and it feels like a chopped waveform. I love it. Obviously, this could be a good candidate for the volume envelope or the filter envelope, as you see fit. Soft feedback. I love how it like develops. It's even cooler when you put a bit of room around it. Love it. We'll continue on. Thumb loop. So, a thumb roll is where you lick your finger and you apply pressure on a drum head and you get a sort of resonance of the drum. There's lots of different variations of this throughout the instrument. I love how it just sort of evolves and builds up again. Great with a bit of room, also great with a bit of distortion, like this is quite a soft, like slow attack, this one. As with the 13 feedback M1 and M2, we've got mic group 1, mic group 2. So mic group 1, so it's loading, we see that just down here. So mic group 1 in this instance is a contact mic, so I use C juicers, which are a type of contact mic. and mic group 2. Sounds great with distortion as well. Again with the first one, SS is short start. So potentially a little bit chaotic sounding, but there's a lot of manipulation that we can do. Can you imagine that just sort of tucked into a track? I think it's quite nice, the movement of it. 14 Thumb, this is one of my absolute favourites. 14-inch scratch tom. Love that. So now we come away from the sustained sound and we come to the hoops. So we've got a 15-inch die-cast hoop. I did record all of the hoops, and some of them just didn't work. Nice with a bit of space around them. Good to combine with other sounds, maybe the synth as well. 15 Hoop Gamelan, so this was with a mallet, and I thought it gave like a sort of, almost like that sort of gongy. Then we come on to the shells, 16 mallets, this is a 16-inch scratch tom shell. With a palm. I love that so much. Palm 2. Just variations, basically. I recorded so much audio in making this instrument. I think I recorded and edited over 1 million audio files, and this was condensed down to, I think, off the top of my head, it's like 42,000 in the instrument. Obviously, you've got close overhead and room on everything, so that sort of expands it up quite a lot, but there was a lot of audio and a lot of experiments throughout this. And I wanted to present all of the experiments, mainly because I just want this to be like a sort of a capture of that time, of that experimentation in the instrument. And this was really, this sound of the drum shell was one that sort of started a lot of this thinking. And this was the first part of that, the 16 palm. 16 Superball, same drum, but with a Superball, which is a rubber mallet that you rub across the drum. And it's evolving and moving. Great with distortion. Love it. As I was going through all of these, I wanted to find different ways of pitching these, and I wanted to create ways of doing that would be as natural as possible. So I used all manner of different techniques. I tried tuning the drums first off. Didn't totally work for what I wanted. It would change timbre in a way that I didn't quite want. And then I tried digital tuning, and the method that I've hit upon is a kind of combination of lots of different processes, but along the way there are experiments within different ways of tuning stuff that I really liked. I didn't want to just be like, I've created the perfect version of this, that's it, because I thought there was value in these other sounds. So there's thumb loop, thumb pitch, thumb warp, which is a different method of tuning. Sounds amazing with distortion. It's pretty good, isn't it? I love that you can hear the fingertip on the drum. It makes me very happy. Okay, then we come on to some cymbals. You'll notice that the size of the drum used or instrument used is the first bit here. 18 crash. And this came really from one thing that I've done loads in my productions, which is use a detuned crash at the start of something, because it gets it out of the way of all of the mid-range information, you know, like guitar and vocals and all that stuff. So it's just having that like thing underneath, maybe adding a bit of reverb to stuff, just having it kind of tuck underneath. I've used that for years in my productions, and I was like, I'm going to put it in my instrument. 18 thumb. This is an amazing drum, 18-inch scratch floor tom. Thumb short. That's one of my absolute favourite sounds. You can imagine that with a bit of delay on there. I mean, maybe going into a bit of reverb. Lovely stuff. Thumb soft. I love that you can hear the texture on the drum head. It's one of my absolute favourite things. Thumb Whomp. This was a sort of a mistake, and I thought, oh, actually that sounds quite cool. Very much in the Hans Zimmer camp. I mean, you know, Hans, get in touch. 20 Hoop Rattle. This is a Gretsch 20-inch bass drum hoop that had a weird rattle to it. Very frustrating on a drum. Quite cool on an instrument. There we go. 21-inch trash crash. This was a terrible crash cymbal that I absolutely adore. Had a big crack in it, which is why you get that like sort of sounds like a cracked cymbal. 6-inch Tom Granular Stretch. So I went through all of these processes of experimenting. This is, I believe, using the granular engine in Max. I mean, really doesn't sound like a drum at all. Which, to be honest with you, was something I battled with for a long time. Of like, if I'm making this instrument and it doesn't sound like a drum, is it still a drum? And then you just get into this like existential, like kind of cycling thing. It sounds cool. Who cares? 8-inch Tom Crackle Loop. That is a cello bow, sorry. That is a cello bow played on a 8-inch tom. You get all the inconsistencies of the bow, the crackling. It's very beautiful. And remember, there's no effects on this. This is just the close mic. There's nothing happening, no EQ, there's no reverb. 808s. I have an obsession with 808s, as I'm sure many people do. I had a broken octapad that was dying, and I wanted to sample it just to have those sounds. There's something about it coming from that, like the D to A of that octopad. It's like a late 80s octopad. Just sounded really cool. And also, like, putting that into a room. I love it. To be honest with you, that was for me. I also thought it'd be quite handy for like layering stuff. 808 snare, same reason. 808 tom. I just love it. AC08. Now, the AC08 was an instrument that I made for Contact 3 years ago now. The idea was a chromatically, well, like an acoustic version of the 808 drum kit, and I tried to match the sounds acoustically, and part of that was a kick drum, and I tuned the kick drum to an octave, which I did manually, and that was sort of the beginning of this. It was sort of very much part of the kind of the prototyping process as to how I would go about doing this. And what I then did is I then applied the tuning method that's digital that I ended up with in this instrument to one of the AC08 kicks. And I think it gets a better result. So I think the digital version far exceeded the acoustic version of the tuning method that I used. Big tambo. I had a massive tambourine. China drop, that's me throwing a china 10 feet across a room. Kind of cool, isn't it? I found it in a bin, that china. Chinese tom, absolute one of my all-time favourite drums. I love this thing so much. It has a little spring inside to ward off evil spirits. But the problem with it is I only had one, and I wanted like 2 or 3, and I did not have those. And then I thought, oh, I could just tune them. That's why that's there. Clave, don't know how you pronounce that. A really nice thing to be able to layer with. Collingwood sizzle cymbal. Dave Collingwood makes some of my favourite cymbals. There's a sizzle cymbal, which is especially beautiful, especially if you add like a load of reverb. Nice actually with, if you take a bit of the attack out. Can you imagine that with like a sine wave underneath? Conga. I love the sound of a conga. Nice. Cracked china is the same china as china drop, but hit. Very short sustain. Kind of pretty cool for like good for layering, maybe doing some arpeggiated stuff with it. Concert tom MFM1. What is that? Muffled concert toms. Mic group 1. Mic group 2. There's a lot of samples in this particular map. So you could load mic group 1 on one side, mic group 2 on the other, blend between them. Then we've got mic group 3. Now the close mic on mic group 3 is the inside, hang on, I had props on this and I bloody moved them, inside of a Gretsch lug. So that's the drum recorded through the lug. Kind of, you get that thing on the go. That's pretty good. Sounds really cool. To rims, that is hitting the rims of the drums. Really nice. Cool for arpeggiator. Nice to layer under stuff. Almost like a kind of xylophone. Very cool. WO-M1, wide open, no muffling. Same mic group, so mic group 1 is the same mics. Mic group 2 is the same, mic group 3 is the same. And these are concert toms, so they're single-headed toms. Love these drums. A little bit more distance on the close mic. Nice with the overheads, which is an Extinct Audio Valkyr. There's a lot of great British companies that I love represented in this instrument. CT WOM3, same deal. That is the lug springs of the concert toms, but wide open. So you actually get a little bit more sort of resonance of the drum. It's an odd one, isn't it? Cymbal scrape. This is a 1950s Turkish K-Zildjian cymbal. I think it sounds amazing when you put a bit of room on there. Also really good when you... I love how it moves. And then we've got 4 variants of that. The cymbal scrape 2. So that's where you scrape a cymbal across the... scrape a drumstick across the cymbal. Cymbal scrape 3. Love it. Cymbal scrape 4. Cymbal stand flute. This is the part of the instrument where you might go, what are you doing, James? Come on. I got obsessed with this idea of trying to make something from every component part of the drum kit. So you're getting kind of various different sort of concepts shown here. So there's lots of digital stuff that happens, which we'll get into as we go along. There's the original idea, which was like the shells of the kit and the different parts, the tuned toms. And then there's this moment where I thought, well, what if I try and get something from everything? And cymbal stand flute is part of that. That is me literally just blowing across a cymbal stand. Now, as we had concert toms, I also had double-headed toms, and there's the same 3 different mixes there, so M1. Unlike the concert toms, with the double-headed toms, the concert toms I have from 6 ranging down to 18. With the double-headed toms, I had 10 down to 18. And the 18 sort of got pretty low, and then I needed a few extra notes, so I added in a 28-inch bass drum. So you actually get... So there's the 18, and that's the 28. I really love the double-headed toms. M2. Absolutely love them. The M3. Dream of Elvin. You're going to look at that and go, what the hell is that? So in 2016, I was doing a lot of gigs. I was a drummer, playing drums. And around that time I had a recurring dream. And that recurring dream, Elvin Jones floated down on a cloud. And he was like playing his Gretsch rack tom. It was the yellow Gretsch kit that was in this video here. like just like hammering the rack tom, and it's like emanating out this like insane, amazing energy that's just like destroying all of this like negative stuff, all of this bad stuff. And he's telepathically communicating the phrase drums against. In my dream, I was like, that's the greatest rack tom sound I've ever heard. And I've tried to recreate that with what was happening in that dream. There you go. That's the dream of Elvin. Floor tom leg. This is a floor tom leg played with a cello bow. It's one of my favourite sounds. Hands. These are very much intended to be layered. Pop them on, you know, with a sine wave. Head hole. I saw some guy on Instagram like put a hole in a drum head and then use a violin bow. Do you remember earlier I talked about all the different ways that I'd attempted tuning stuff? Well, I also, as part of my experiments, I wanted to make sure that every sound made music. So I made tracks with these as I was going along, just because I didn't want it to be just like gratuitous sort of like, oh, I'm just making sounds from everything. I wanted to make sure that there was, like, I felt that there was music within that, if that makes sense. High delay was something that I made for this track. Which is one of the first things I made with all these sounds. It primarily focused on the sound 16 palm. Let's remind ourselves what that sounds like. High delay is that, but approached differently. But I loved how it sounded, especially up high. Kalimba through tom. A kalimba recorded with contact mics through a tom. Low level thumb, one of my absolute go-to sounds, one of my favourites. Very hard to record because it's very quiet and you have to sort of maintain like constant pressure on the thumb roll as you're doing it. Really hard. And I love how it just sort of like, it dips off in pitch. Absolutely love it. I'm going to talk about lug springs. Lug springs drove me completely insane. What is a lug spring, James? So we have a lug. Here you go. This is a drum lug. This attaches to the shell. The tension rod goes in there. To hold this nut in place, there is, on older drums, a spring. Now, often on drums, these will ring. In the original instrument design, what I wanted was to be able to turn this on and off. That is a feature that does not exist on any software instrument, because it's a pain in the ass. So anyway, I spent months and months and months and months trying to work out a best way of doing that without obviously having to record the drums with the lug springs and without. And I hit upon like a load of impulse responses, but along that path, I started, you know, obviously doing that, and I thought, it sort of sounds like a kalimba. So my initial part was I recorded a lug spring kalimba. I recorded 2 versions of that. But also I made it feedback, which I love. I love how it like evolves and builds up. I also used pull stretch. Very much intended to be a layer. The next thing we've got is legato. So that is a tension rod into the lug. I love how much texture and noise is on that. I think it sounds really great with a bit of reverb. Then there's a looped version of that. More cowbell. Could have just called it cowbell, to be honest, but you know. I have a fever.
I got a fever!
Fraser Murray made me a drum shell with some wood that I got. And I had this idea a really long time ago of doing like a complete sample instrument of the drum. So from like the beginning part, from the wood to the shell to the drum to the finished drum, like recording it as a sample instrument. I couldn't really work out how to present it, but those sort of workings and that prototype is presented here. So there's two variations. You hear the low end of the shell. There's a soft version of that with a mallet. Love that drum. Nolan hi-hats, these were made for me by Matt Nolan. So you can get some really cool arpeggiated stuff on the go. Nuts and bolts. All the nuts and bolts of the drum kit. Pedal squeak. So I wanted to get something from a pedal. Classically, the Ludwig Speaking pedal is known for being quite squeaky. It features in a load of classic rock records, like Led Zeppelin 2. You hear the squeaky pedal. And I spent ages recording one. Now, perc nuts and bolts is the only instrument or the only waveform that is not chromatically tuned. I've recorded so many of these like percussive textures that I thought that could be useful. Reamp 808 snare. Got a sort of softer texture than... Really love it. Ride bell. The cymbals have a lot of velocity in them. I think that's the secret with cymbals, to try and get them to sound as realistic as possible. Root brush. This is the Chinese tom played with a drumstick called a broomstick. I just love the sort of splat of the brush on the drum. Shell tone. Again, we're going back to all those initial experiments, and this is a refinement of that. So we have shell tone, shell waves, and shell fee are all in the same kind of world. So shell waves is applying granular process, and then we have shell fee. I think the best version of the kind of shell xylophone. Shello, as you may have guessed by now, love a pun. Shello, drum shell, cello. I love that sound. Shepherd drums was an accident. It doesn't really sound like a shepherd tone, but it sort of does. I mean, there's a lot going on there. Pop a bit of distortion on. Snare drums. I love snare drums. So we've got a lot of stuff that's just the drum tuned. We've also got things that are treated in particular ways. So we start off with snare 4160 cross stick. 4160 is a model number of a Gretsch 14x5 chrome of a brass snare. This is the cross stick. .4160 loop. The texture of the snare wires as it sort of feeds back on itself. I think is really beautiful. Here it loops round almost like a delay. Then we get 4160 muffled, which is just the snare drum muffled. But I love when you pitch it down or you go down an octave, it sort of starts falling apart. It sounds like there's almost like a sort of delay between the drum and the wires. 4160 pitch. .4160 short. So I almost thought you could use this as like a layering understuff. So for example, I've got the Chinese tom here. Maybe taking off the room sound of that. Maybe using the envelope. Almost make a sort of strange snare sound with it. And obviously you can layer that with anything. You also might have noticed that as I'm going over stuff, down here in the bottom, it's giving me pointers as to what everything is. 4160 watt. So really kind of digital sounding. And then we've got 4160 WO, which is wide open. Something really useful about having a drum that you can just pitch and tune. Snare, BB, muffled. That is my Ludwig Black Beauty. Just a mega sounding drum. BB wide open. Snare beef. Just a great beefy sounding snare drum. Snare broom. Snare drum with a broomstick. Just very soft. Snare buzz roll. Similar in sort of approach to Dream of Elvin. A sort of chaotic, like moving of different things. I absolutely love snare feedback. That is the 4160 feeding back. Two variants of that. Snare off friction. This is a friction mallet, which is like a rubber ball and you drag it across the head. I love this with distortion. Especially the pitch down stuff where it feels like you're just dragging it really slowly. Snare Palace. This is a weird thing that I invented where did I invent it? I came up with it. It's like an Omni U87 in the middle of 3 snare drums. So it's very soft. There's no attack. It's like a whew. The idea was that you sort of would, again, layer it with other stuff. So with the Chinese tom, you can sort of create a snare sound. One of the last things that I came up against was snare wires. How do you get something from snare wires? So I hit upon making this jig, and that would enable me to play the snare wires sort of like a zither, sort of like a guitar. I used an electromagnetic pickup, and this was like dropping a chopstick on there. And it's trying to make it sound like a marxophone, which was an instrument from the early 20th century, I think. And it has a kind of like a mallet that sort of bounces on the string, and you get this like kind of sound. Muted. strum, willfully kind of a little bit chaotic. The snick drum, that is a kick drum with a snare drum in front of it. Could mix it with the snare palace. Love it. Spectral rims. Now, this is the only sound out of 120 that does not have overhead and rooms. What this is a 15-inch hoop, but it's split into spectral layers. I'll play everything together. Very nice. In the room, attack portion, then we get the... And so you're able to balance those spectral layers, maybe take the rims part of the rims in there. Does that make sense? Beautiful with a bit of reverb. Glorious. Tiny bell ring. This is when I sort of realised that I wanted a few extra sounds in there to layer with stuff. We get ringing. And then we get single. During this process, towards the end, I bought a Trixon kit, which is very much going to be the next of things. And I included the drum hoops. They sounded very different to the Gretsch ones. A lot cleaner, actually. And there's also the tine. Very thin sounding, beautiful to layer up with things. Old Tan was part of my experiments. It's using a load of guitar pedals. Very beautiful, gorgeous with the room on there. I also created a short version. One of my all-time favourite sounds. I'm going to start with my favourite version and then go back to the other one. Vellum 2, probably my favourite sound. I've made Vellum drum heads for a very long time. One of the things that is absolutely beautiful about Vellum drum heads is when they are wet and you first put them on a drum after you've made them, you tap the head and you get this. This absolutely crazy low frequency. Doesn't really sound like a drum, even though it is. Just so much low end in there. VK steel hoop. This was made by the amazing Alan Van Cleef. Very different to the other hoops. Tine light, beautiful to layer. As I'd made a synth, I thought it would make sense to have synth waveforms. That is all those are. Obviously you still got the room, which I also think is very cool. You've got the filter envelope. We haven't even looked at the filter envelope yet. So we've got saw, sine, square, triangle, sine wave. I love a sine wave. Square wave. And they were just made for layering. I thought it was helpful, especially with low frequency stuff. We've obviously got the sub oscillator here, but I wanted those with room sound. Wet conga, very similar to the Vellum. Obviously conga head's much thicker. So you just get like very sort of dry sound, ironically. The drum head can't move very much, so it gives the impression of like a really thick sound. And woodblock, final sound, 120. And all these sounds are made to sort of complement or just provide you with options to make your own thing. There is 1,000 presets in there for you to dive into. This is just the waveforms on their own. Thank you very much for watching. I knew this was going to be a mammoth video. It's out on the 20th of May. Thank you very much for watching. Drop a comment below and let me know what your favourite sound was. Mine is Vellum 2, I think. There's a lot of stuff tied up in that. Or Dream of Elvin. I don't know, changes a lot. But yeah, thanks very much for checking it out. See you very soon.